All right, now we're on to another business entity that has some more propensity to being misused. A lot of people really like them, but we're going to get into some of the abuses of limited liability companies later on. Read your chapter objectives on your own, please. Okay, so a limited liability company is also kind of like the LLP, even more so though, a combination of partnership and corporation. So it has that pass-through taxation that a lot of partnerships have and doesn't get taxed at the corporate tax rate. It doesn't have partners, it has members. It does have limited liability. Now, typically a limited liability company is not a good company to take nationally. You want a corporation for that because the laws are more similar regarding corporations from state to state. A limited liability company law varies greatly from state to state. Now, how this is a little bit more like a corporation is that the LLC is separate from its members more so than a partnership. And so it's considered an artificial person and has a lot of rights in a court of law. So now we're at ULCA and RULCA. You gotta love these acronyms. The Uniform Limited Liability Company Act. And typically these acts aren't applied so uniformly across the country like we were talking about, so you don't have to have them memorized as much. Sometimes LLCs are regulated by the Securities Exchange Commission. The LLC would have to be more of an investment, and investors would have to be expecting to make money off of someone else's work, so that's not as common. Now, just like the LLP had some regulations on who could be it, LLCs have regulations on who can be them as well. And in the state of California, they're smart, and they don't let attorneys become LLCs. Other states, some other states do, but an LLC is getting better, but has some things that allow for more fraud. So, there's a couple bad attorneys out there that give the rest of us a bad name. So the legislatures, in their wisdom, won't let attorneys be an LLC in the state of California. And part of this is because in LLC you don't have to have a lot, if any, capital to start up. So you can start up a business with no money. And typically they're not required to have liability insurance either. So you can see, maybe I'm giving you a sneak peek into some of that misuse of an LLC. Alright, so the public document is very similar to a public document for a corporation, but it's called Articles of Organization versus Articles of Incorporation. The name of a limited liability company must have LLC in this, and this is supposed to give the public some warning that they're dealing with an LLC. However, I don't think most of the public knows that LLCs are more common for abuse of a business organization, so I don't know that this is a really good warning. The article organization has to have the main office of the LLC, and this is important so that people can go and look at the financial records. That's where they're supposed to be kept. All right, the private document is going to be quite intense because there's not a lot of really good revised or uniform acts across the country, so the operating agreement. The operating agreement is going to have quite a bit of detail in it and be pretty extensive. And the operating agreement should talk about meetings, and whether the LLC has the ability to assume its own name, whether it can buy and sell property of any type, whether it can loan money. What kind of rights does it have as an artificial person, so to speak? Now the financing, if there is any, because a business can basically open on credit. So I have my own law office, and every day I get hit up with phone calls and emails saying that I can have a business line of credit. So even though it says we can finance with cash, property, or service, typically what happens is people finance on credit. And that's a problem because if a company starts on credit and then gets sued, it doesn't have any assets to pay that lawsuit. So here are some other reasons why an LLC is more likely to be abused as a business entity. So you don't have to have any money to start. You can even have kind of a shell company, a holding company that acts on your behalf for your business. They are unfortunately used to launder money and finance terrorism. Many don't have a physical address, they just have a P.O. box. Many do not have employees. Foreigners can own an LLC, and that's not a problem in and of itself, except that some terrorist organizations have had LLCs in the country. And that's not to say that we don't have horrible problems with terrorism within our country. So service providers can arrange for a resident agent for service of process, mail forwarding, office space, business license. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about those businesses that you see on TV that shake weight offer you like an exercise piece of equipment for $30 plus $9.95 shipping and handling, or 80s compilation of music for $20 and then shipping and handling. And it's just somebody out of the garage shipping for that money a product, and they might have an office space, but then nobody actually works there. The problem is, as long as somebody's doing this legitimately, that's fine. But the problem is, what if somebody starts a company, offers something for sale, doesn't actually sell it to the person? How do you go after them? They had no assets of any kind, and that's unfortunately what's been happening to some extent with LLCs. Here's another reason you can have a lot of abuse with an LLC. Usually you only have to have one person to start one up. And honestly, I would prefer to be a limited liability company if I could be in the state of California because of the limited liability. Also, I don't have to have as much insurance if I have a limited liability company because it's kind of inherent in the business. So it's kind of a bummer. Attorneys can't do it if they want to be legal and ethical in the state of California. They're still not allowed to do this type of entity. All right, so management is flexible. You can have everybody participate. You can have those who want to participate. You can hire an outside manager. And you can read this one on your own. Liability. The members, even though they might be starting up an illegit business, they typically have almost no personal liability for the debts of the LLC. So whatever they put into the business, and if they did it all on credit, they put like nothing in, then they're out nothing. And the problem is if that one individual acts in a bad way, how do they get punished? They don't. Their business, it's difficult to punish the business. So it's like protecting somebody against their own bad behavior. And when somebody sues the LLC, often it was started with no capital, so then the person that sued the LLC gets absolutely nothing. Something to think about is a lot of high-risk things are LLCs. So a lot of amusement parks are LLCs. Why? Because it's very expensive to insure someplace like SeaWorld, for example. They're actually self-insured. So a lot of roller coaster companies are incorporated as an LLC, that gives them some limited liability. And then they, you know, if they can't get insurance, it helps protect them. Okay, so you can read this one on your own. Typically, the profits and losses are similar to a general partnership and a limited liability partnership. Unless otherwise in the operating agreement, you have a split that is equal to the number of partners you have. So if you have 3, you have 33%. If you have 4, you have 25%. Taxation is passed through. It's almost exactly like with a partnership, unless you have only one member, and then they're taxed like a sole proprietorship. Now, an LLC can choose to be taxed as a corporation if it so decides to. Like if a member was extremely wealthy and it was actually a better deal to be taxed as a corporation. All right, the last slide you can read on your own as well. All right, bye for now.